Today we're talking about negative entities and the enslavement of mankind. Specifically, we want to answer the question, are we under the influence of unseen forces? Do they exist? What are they? What is their agenda? Now, what are we talking about today? Well, we've been exploring something called the raw material or the law of one, which is a series of communications from an entity that calls itself Ra. If you haven't seen my videos on that, I did an introduction on it. You should go check it out. I have a whole playlist on the law of one. But essentially what we're doing is that we are exploring these transmissions, and particularly what we're going to be exploring today is the concept of negative entities. And Ra introduces the idea of these negative entities, and it begins to explain what they are, why they're here, how they operate, what they're doing. And specifically, these entities are called the Orion Group. So, very interesting stuff. We're going to be talking about this today, and it's good stuff. Now, as always, I want to say, when it comes to this material, I always want to point out that just because I'm reading it on my channel does not mean that I believe that it is true. I think when it comes to the raw material, it could either be real, or it could be made up, or it could be a manifestation of the channeler's unconscious. It could be either one of these things. So I always want to make that clear when going into this stuff, that one remains skeptical, one remains rational, and one remains critical. So that being said, let's begin. I just want to say, hey, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot. You get access to our weekly members-only videos and all our members-only videos, a new one every single week. Last week was How Did the Universe Begin? Science and religion are both wrong, as we explored the origin of the universe in relation to the metaphysical domain and the Big Bang, etc. You can get that by accessing by being a member on Patreon at any tier, or joining tier 2 or higher on YouTube right below this video. Also, hey, there's a lot of scammers out there in the comments that are claiming to be me, that are reaching out to people saying that I have a WhatsApp or a Telegram. That's not me. Don't fall for that. It's a scam. Also, there are people and groups out there who don't want this information to get out, and who don't like what I'm doing and don't like what I stand for. So there's a lot of groups and people out there spreading misinformation and disinformation about me and what we're doing here. So stay rational, keep your eyes open, don't fall for the BS. All right, let's begin. So we're taking a look at the law of one material and exploring particularly the idea of negative entities and the Orion Group. So let's just start right away. And as always, I want to remind you, it's good to remain skeptical with this stuff. We don't know if it's made up. We don't know if it's real. We don't know if it's a manifestation of Carla's unconscious, but we're going to be exploring and diving into that today. So let's bring this up. So, by the way, you can read all of this on lawofone.info, and it's a great website. You can read all of it for free. You can actually listen to all of the sessions as well. It's a great site. Check it out. So I'll just start. For those who don't know, this is a question and answer scenario here, where Carla is the channeler, and so she is in a trance state with 3 microphones recording everything she says. This entity that calls itself Ra, which is a social memory complex or a group collective mind that exists in another dimension, which is communicating through Carla. And Dawn is a professor of physics and engineering and is asking questions to Ra by directing questions towards Carla. So Dawn says, I'll ask you about Orion. So Orion is the name that Ra refers to these negative entities. So these negative entities Ra refers to as Orion or the Orion Group. So Dawn says, I'll just ask about Orion. You mentioned Orion as a source of some of the contacts of UFOs. Can you tell me something of that contact, its purpose? Ra says, I am Ra. Consider, if you will, a simple explanation of intentions, which are bad good. So remember, Ra always sees reality as one thing. So instead of saying teaching, Ra will say teach learning. Because Ra looks at reality as being one, a single unity. So when someone teaches, it's also learning, because another aspect of that being is learning. So when Ra says the intentions which are bad good, it's putting the emphasis on bad, but also means good in a way, because, well, it's good for that entity, which is still a part of the single unity. So I'm just throwing that out there so it's not too confusing. So if you will, consider an example of intentions which are bad good. This example is Adolf, which of course is referring to the leader of Germany during World War II. I don't want to say anything that would, YouTube would think is weird. So this is your vibratory sound complex. The intention is to presumably unify by choosing the distortion complex called elite from a social memory complex, and then enslaving by various effects those who are seen as the distortion of not elite. There is then the concept of taking the social memory complex, thus weeding and adding to it a distortion thought of by the so-called Orion Group as an empire. The problem facing them is that they face a great deal of random energy released by the concept of separation. This causes them to be vulnerable, as the distortion amongst their own members are not harmonized. Okay, so what's going on here? So Don wants to know something about the Orion Group, these negative entities. Ra says, okay, well, if you look at World War II, Germany is a good example of sort of what they do. So they're saying that what they're trying to do is unify. And I've talked about before how they're, so I've talked about before how there's true unity, and then there's coerced unity or forced unity. And that's something that I always warn against. I always say we have different paths going forward right now. One of those paths is the path we want to create as the new beginning. We want to create a brilliant, beautiful, unified new world. However, society could also collapse, or a forced unity could arise by a ruling elite taking power and essentially enslaving the rest of the world. That's sort of like because the world is united in a certain way, but it's united in slavery. And so essentially that is what they are saying that the Orion Group, these negative entities, are all about. They choose elite from, they say, okay, so it says, They try to unify by choosing the distortion complex called elite from a social memory complex, and then enslaving by various effects those who are seen as the distortion of non-elite. So what they mean is that the Orion Group sees a collective of minds or a collective of people and attempts to unify it by creating an elite and then enslaving those who are seen as not elite. There is then the concept of taking the social memory complex, thus weeded, and adding to it a distortion thought of by the so-called Orion Group as an empire. So they start, adding this to their so-called empire and their own ideas to it. But Ra says the problem facing this Orion Group, the thing that's difficult, is that they face a great deal of random energy released by the concept of separation. This causes them to be vulnerable, as the distortions amongst their own members are not harmonized. So if you think about it, what Ra is saying is that the problem that the Orion Group faces is that they are an empire. They are trying to create unity, but it's like a forced unity, a coerced unity with enslavement. And so what Ra is saying is that the Orion Group has a problem because they don't understand unity correctly. They're not doing it correctly. So energy is very random within them because their own members aren't harmonized. So you can think about it. Think about, like a hierarchy that's obsessed with like dominance and control and power, where you're going to have like members like infighting for dominance and trying to be, to rise up the ranks by screwing the other one over, or, keeping certain members of theirs slaves and things like that. So you can see that since they haven't understood unity correctly, there exists a lot of separation and random energy, and their membership is not harmonized. So it's very, it's not that stable because of the way that it's structured and the way that they misunderstand unity. Now you can see the complete opposite in a world or minds that are unified and harmonized. And so, for example, this is the complete opposite of a world we want to build, where a world is based on increasing the quality of life of every individual and the collective. So it's completely different, where it's not about this gross, dominance and control and power over others. Rather, it's about helping others. Instead of trying to like dominate and control another, it'd be about teaching and empowering each other so that we can be a unified and strong whole and strong collective together. So I just want to point this out because there is a way that the world can unify, but in a very negative way, and we need to watch out for this, especially with the rich elite, because the rich elite, the billionaire class, are creating this negatively unified world where, look at all the billionaires that control the spread of information and communication through social media. You have Elon Musk that controls Twitter. You have Zuckerberg that controls Instagram, Threads, WhatsApp, Telegram, Instagram, all these different, I saw a meme with all that he has, like the gauntlet of power or whatever Thanos has. I've never watched that movie, but it was funny. He had the different social media icons as the different jewels, but it's sort of true. And you have to watch out for this, because when you control communication, you control information. When you control information, you start being able to control the world. So anyway, like I said, this is something that we really need to look out for, and this is ultimately what we want to curb and stop from happening. And how do we stop this from happening? By raising consciousness, because when you understand what reality is, you know that it should not be structured that way. So we'll actually talk more about that if we have time, but we'll continue here. So Don says, what is the density of the Orion Group? So according to Ra, there is an octave or 8 levels or densities. And these different levels represent different levels of consciousness. So there's the first density, the second density, third density, fourth density, fifth density, sixth density, seventh density. Then you can graduate to, complete and total union. Ra claims to be sixth density. So that's a certain level of consciousness, the sixth level of consciousness. It is said that, according to this material, that Earth and humanity is currently at the third density, but attempting to transition to fourth density. So just real quick, we can understand this as being first density can be just like pure instinctual behavior. Second density, you can understand it as being like having more of like emotional understanding. And then third density is really self-awareness. And so this is where humanity is at, where they have instinctual behavior, they have emotional behavior, and they have self-awareness. What is fourth density? Fourth density is awareness of our interconnectedness and unity. And this is what we are trying to get humanity to move to right now. Now, in our system, we don't call it fourth density. We just say we're trying to get humanity to move to a higher state of consciousness, or we're trying to get humanity to move to hyper-awareness. Instead of just self-awareness, they're going to hyper-awareness or all-awareness. Instead of just self-awareness, it's all-awareness. And this is what we're trying to get humanity to move to. So anyway, the questioner is saying, what density is the Orion Group? Basically, what level of consciousness are they at? So Ra claims that it is a sixth density being. So for those, real quick, Ra claims to be a sixth density social memory complex. What is a social memory complex? Well, in the law of one, a social memory complex is a group mind. It's a group of minds that act as one. In our system, we would call something like this a subnetwork mind. Now, I just want to make it very, very clear, again, as I say this and make these comparisons, we don't know if this material is real or not. It could be made up. but it could be real, or it could be a manifestation of Carla's unconscious. So I just want to say, just because I talk about these things and show comparisons, doesn't mean that this is real. I'm kind of just saying, if this is real, here are the correspondences to how we know. If basically saying, this is how, if it were real, this is how it would work. So I just want to make that clear, because it's important to, stay lucid as we go. But anyway, what is the consciousness level of the Orion Group? I am Ra. Like the Confederation. Okay, so what's the Confederation? So you have the Orion Group, which is a bunch of entities that work together. The Confederation, according to Ra, is the antithesis to the Orion Group. They are a group of positive minds, and Ra claims to be a member of the Confederation. And it's does positive things, whereas Orion is the negative empire. So Ra says, I am Ra. Like the Confederation, the densities of the mass consciousnesses which comprise that group are varied. There are very few third density, a large number of fourth density, a similarly large number of fifth density, and very few sixth density entities comprising this organization. So there's not that many that are self-aware. There are a lot that are aware of the interconnectedness of reality. There are very little that are sixth density that have risen to the status of becoming that sixth density being. And, this would kind of make sense if you look at it from a certain perspective. It's basically saying there aren't that many that are self-aware. Not that there aren't that many that are self-aware. There aren't that many who are only self-aware. The majority are more than self-aware. So basically saying the Orion Group is more evolved than to just have self-aware beings. It's beyond that. There aren't many who are just self-aware. Most of them are more evolved than that. Most of them have an understanding of interconnectedness to a very high degree, but not so high that they reach sixth density. And this, of course, makes sense because sixth density would require an extremely high level of harmonization and synchronization. And though they understand interconnectedness, they don't understand it to a level where they are able to form a true interconnectedness that's a force interconnectedness. So you could see it would be very, very difficult for them to get to that higher level. So that's essentially what Ra is saying about them. Their numbers are perhaps 1/10 of ours at any point in the space-time continuum, as the problem of spiritual entropy causes them to experience constant disintegration of their social memory complexes. Their power is the same as ours. The law of one blinks neither at the light or the darkness, but is available for service to others and service to self. However, service to others results in service to self, thus preserving and further harmonizing the distortions of those entities seeking intelligent infinity through these disciplines. Basically saying that Orion is as powerful as them. There's not as many of them because of spiritual entropy or disintegration. And, that would make sense if they're not able to harmonize or synchronize properly, and there's constant random energy fluctuations and infighting. And the Orion Group is associated with service to self, and then Ra considers itself service to others. But Ra says that service to others entails service to self because ultimately service to others is serving the self. Now, one thing that I will say I'm a bit critical of Ra is I think that Ra emphasizes service to self a lot and does not put enough importance on one's own independence and whatnot. So the thing is that we want a world where we're all helping each other grow collectively and helping each other out, but it's also fine to work on yourself and want things for yourself. It's only bad. So here's the point. It's only wrong when it's at the expense of the collective. So if you do something for yourself and it's not at the expense of the collective, you're ultimately helping the collective. So in that sense, service to self ends up being service to others. Because if you grow and make yourself better and are more fulfilled, then you're ultimately helping the whole grow because you're a part of the whole. Same thing with service to self. Service to self can result, or service to others can result in service to self, because when you're helping others, you'll ultimately help the self as well, especially when reality is viewed as being one mind. So anyway, I think some people have asked me, because I said I don't agree with everything that Ra says. Some people have asked me, well, what is it? Well, first of all, Ra says some really crazy things sometimes. There's some stuff in here that's pretty outlandish and out there in here, which is one reason why I'm skeptical of the material. There is some stuff in here that is pretty strange, and more so than this. I mean, stuff that's like, what? That sounds kind of bullshitty. But just with regard to the philosophy, one of the things that I'm a little critical of is that I don't think there enough importance is put on how one can work on oneself and how that does help the whole if it's not at the expense of others. That's the important part to remember. And so Ra continues, those seeking intelligent infinity. And intelligent infinity is basically what Ra refers to as the foundational energy of all existence. So it would be what we understand as the source frequencies, the frequencies of the source. So we view reality as being mind and frequencies, and composed of fundamental frequencies, Fourier basis waves in mathematical terms, which are the fundamental frequencies of the source, which make up all reality. So to understand it in an intuitive way, it's like the keys of the piano that can be played to create any song that you'd like, depending on the combination that you play. The frequencies of the source are like those fundamental frequencies, those base frequencies that can create any song, or in other words, can create any wave structure in existence, any particle, any material thing, anything that has some sort of substantive form at all can be created from these frequencies of the source. So this is what Ra refers to more or less as intelligent infinity. So those seeking intelligent infinity through the use of service to self create the same amount of power, but as we've said, have constant difficulty because of the concept of separation, which is implicit in the manifestation of the service to self, which involves power over others. This weakens and eventually disintegrates the energy collected by such mind-body-spirit complexes who call the Orion Group, and the social memory complexes which comprise the Orion Group. So it's really interesting. Basically, they're saying, again, that because they don't understand unity correctly, this distortion of separation is within their concepts, and it causes this disintegration because of their constant attempt to have power over others. So this weakens and eventually disintegrates the energy. And this is an interesting point, collected by such mind-body-spirit complexes who call the Orion Group and the social memory complexes which comprise the Orion Group. Excuse me. So when Ra says mind-body-spirit complexes, they're talking about individual beings. So what they're saying is that there's individual beings, like humans, for example, who call on the Orion Group or use their energy. And this eventually weakens their collected energy and the Orion Group itself. So Ra is basically saying those who, human beings or entities that call on the Orion Group and the Orion Group itself eventually has this problem of disintegration because the energy is not being used optimally because it's fighting for dominance and power and control over others. It should be noted, carefully pondered and accepted that the law of one is available to any social memory complex which has decided to strive together for any seeking of purpose, be it service to others or service to self. So basically saying the law of one basically doesn't say what is good or what is bad. Any social memory complex or any group of minds can strive regardless of how they do it. Basically, there's no like moral to the law of one doesn't have like a 10 commandments. The law of one just simply says reality is one, reality is united. And so groups can use the information that reality is one in negative ways or positive ways. And Ra is saying and Ra says, the laws, which are primal distortions of the law of one, then are placed into operation, and the illusion of space-time is used as a medium for the development of the results of those choices freely made. Thus, all entities learn, no matter what they seek, all learn the same, some rapidly, some slowly. So, the laws of which the universe how the universe works, are placed into operation. And this gives rise to the illusion of space and time. Also, this is what we call the holos, by the way, the illusion of space and time. And this illusion of space and time is used as a medium for the development of the results of the choices freely made. So whatever a mind chooses is reflected in the material world. Or some even use the material world to learn in, which is what we do. It's a medium for learning. Thus all entities learn, no matter what they seek, all learn the same, some rapidly, some slowly. So I think that's pretty much, you understand what that means. So the questioner, Don, says, using an example of a fifth density group or social memory complex of the Orion Group, what was their previous density before they became fifth density? So they're saying, hey, a mind that's at the fifth level of consciousness, what level of the Orion Group were they at before they were at the fifth level? Ra says, I am Ra. The progress through densities is sequential. A fifth density social memory complex would be comprised of mind-body-spirit complexes harvested from fourth density. By the way, if you guys are interested in what harvest is, or the harvest, let me know and we can do a video on that. Then the conglomerate or mass mind-body-spirit complex does its melding, and the results are due to the infinitely various possibilities of combinations of distortions. Basically, Ra says it goes in order. They were fourth before they were fifth. Fifth is comprised of all minds who graduate from fourth. So essentially, you can think of it kind of like this. Earth right now as a whole, and so I'm using law of one's terms to like kind of in conjunction with ours here. But so Ra would say that Earth is third density. However, there are some of us that are fourth density. So those of us who are above and beyond self-awareness. So, those who have developed an analog all, those who have an understanding of what reality is as an interconnected system, those who are beyond self-awareness. We exist on Earth. But most of Earth is still in third density. We're trying to get humanity to fourth density, to use their terms. So you could say that Earth is third density. However, there are many of us now starting to form fourth density. Those who have graduated from third move to fourth. So, Don says, I'm trying to understand how a group such as the Orion Group would progress. I was of the opinion that a closer understanding of the law of one created the condition of acceptability, moving, say, from our third density to the fourth in our transition now. And I'm trying to understand how it would be possible if you were in the Orion Group and pointed towards self-service, how you would progress, say from the third density to the fourth. What learning would be necessary for that? So Don is essentially saying, hey, I thought in order to move from the third density to the fourth density, you have to have an acceptance of others. So Don is saying, how can the Orion Group evolve to different levels of consciousness if they're not being accepting, if they're still trying to have power over others in a dominant negative way. Don is saying, I thought in order to evolve to higher levels of consciousness, you have to have that acceptance and empathy. Ra says, I am Ra. This is the last question of length for this instrument at this time. Ra refers to Carla the channeler as the instrument. Ra says, you will recall that we went into some detail as to how those not oriented towards seeking service for others, yet nevertheless found and could use the gateway to intelligent infinity. This is true at all densities in our octave. We cannot speak for those above us, as you would say, in the next quantum or octave of beingness. This is, however, true of this octave of densities. The beings are harvested because they can see and enjoy the light love of the appropriate density. Those who have found this light love light, without benefit of a desire for service, nevertheless, by the law of free will, have the right to use that light love for whatever purpose. Also, it may be inserted that there are systems of study which enable the seeker of separation to gain these gateways. This study is as difficult as the one which we have described to you, but there are those with the perseverance to pursue the study just as you desire to pursue the difficult path of seeking to know in order to serve. The distortion lies in the fact that those who seek to serve the self are seen by the law of one as precisely the same as those who seek to serve others. For are all not one? To serve yourself and to serve others is a dual method of saying the same thing. If you can understand the essence of the law of one, at this time we would answer any brief questions you may have. So what Ra is essentially saying is, once again, any being can understand how reality operates and use that to its own will and to its own advantage. It doesn't necessarily have to be good. It doesn't necessarily have to be harmonious. So, for example, one can graduate, again, using their terms, from third density to fourth density by realizing that we are all interconnected. Now, when we realize that we're all interconnected, especially in our system, the Neogenian, we have specific steps on how to do this with metacognition, concept networking, and phenomenological experience, so that it's understood correctly and ends up in harmonization and synchronization. However, other minds can indeed learn and realize that we're all interconnected, but can use that in a nefarious way. And they can use that in a nefarious way, like I kind of described, in forming these negative, dominant hierarchies of enslavement. So it's sort of looking at it in a way where, okay, I realize that we're all interconnected, but I'm more powerful than you. You should be better. You aren't. So I am going to dominate and control. Do you see how it's still coming with an understanding that reality is interconnected, but not using it towards harmony and synchronicity, using it towards creating like this slave-like scenario where it's still an understanding of interconnectivity, but just because you understand that the world is interconnected doesn't necessarily mean that you're understanding it correctly or that you're really realizing its impact. So this is why it's really important in our system. So I mentioned metacognition, concept networking, and phenomenological experience. This is important for reaching hyper-awareness. Metacognition is thought thinking about itself. So this is examining your own thoughts, your unconscious mind, making the unconscious conscious. It's about examining the structure of reality, because reality is thought, thought thinking about thought, understanding how reality works, understanding its energetic frequency structure, understanding its mathematical structure, understanding what we all are. Concept networking is about being able to put all these ideas together to form a unified understanding of reality. This creates a new structure in the psyche known as the analog all. This is what literally raises one to a new level of consciousness, because you literally develop a new structure in the psyche. Just like you develop the analog I or the ego to be self-aware, you develop the analog all to become all-aware, aware of the all. Now, but then there's phenomenological experience, and this is important. If you don't do this part, this is where you can be negative. This is where you can become in this negative hierarchical enslavement structure, because what is phenomenological experience? Phenomenological experience is knowing what it is like to be. What I mean by that is there's a difference between having a conceptual knowing of what reality is and feeling and knowing what it is like to be all reality, what it is like to be an eternal mind, what it is like to be the absolute experiencing itself through itself. It is the experiential grokking, the intuitive flowing, the knowing and understanding of what it is like to be a thing, which is completely different than just a conceptual understanding. So for example, you can look at all these equations that might list out a different color, the visible light spectrum. But if you're looking at that, that's completely different than seeing a rainbow. Even though these equations in front of you will give you the formal structure of a rainbow, seeing the rainbow and having that experience of the rainbow is completely different. So the reason why this is important is because if one has not done this, you don't get a good grasp on the journey that we are all on together and the empathy and harmony that comes along with it, and understanding that we are here not to just have progress for the sake of progress. See, this is always the problem. When you have people or groups that are just like progress for the sake of progress, this is when you get really dangerous situations like, World War II Germany, or, there's a lot of other things that I could mention where when people are obsessed with progress for the sake of progress, you can lead to a lot of dangerous situations. And this is sort of the mentality of what Ra is describing as the Orion Group. Now, we don't want progress for the sake of progress. We want progress for increasing the quality, for the sake of increasing the quality of life of every individual in the collective. So do you see the difference? If you want progress for the sake of progress, you could have this dog-eat-dog, negatively competitive fight for dominance and control, full of psychopaths and all this crazy, chaotic, random energy. But when you have purpose or progress for the purpose of increasing the quality of life of every individual in the collective, well, now you're not going to do something that directly harms another person in an irrational way. You're going to be like, oh, I want to help you and I want to lift you up because I realize that I am a part of you and you are a part of me and we are all in this together. And phenomenological experience really cultivates that, because when you have the understanding of what existence is, you're like, oh, wow, I really get it now in a way where I understand that we are all in this great game and journey together, and we are all ourselves experiencing ourselves through ourselves. So we should all be trying to help build each other up and celebrating our diversity and learning and growing from each other. Because ultimately we're all just different shards or pieces of a unity. We're eternal shards and pieces. We never disappear, or we ourselves are eternal nodes in a cosmic network, but we are all reflections of each other. We are all fractals of that one mind, which is us, which is what we are. There's no one mind that's separate from us. We are that one mind coming to consciousness through itself, through us, because we are it. So having that aspect of it is very important. And this is what I like about the law of one, because even if the law of one is all bullshit, this is really interesting. And it allows us to talk about these concepts. It brings up, see how it exercises the mind, how it exercises the brain. This could be real. It could be bullshit, or it could be a manifestation of the collective unconscious, or even Carla's unconscious. But either way, it gets us discussing these topics, which are, because whether Orion exists or not, these nefarious people and groups and entities do. Now, are they actually literally called Orion, and do they do everything that Ra said? That remains to be seen. But yes, of course, there are minds like the rich elite billionaires who want to keep the world in a coerced state of enslavement. And there are, of course, higher beings that I'm sure are of the same mindset, just on another level. So this is why I like the law of one, because regardless of its validity, whether it's real or not, it allows us to talk about these things in a very interesting way, and explore these important topics. So anyway, really important to realize that just because someone reaches a level of consciousness that's beyond self-awareness doesn't mean that they are benevolent. So remember, we don't take the law of one as being gospel or anything like this. We have our own system. And in the Neogenian, if you get to a level of awareness where you understand that we're interconnected, but you haven't developed the understanding of why we need to synchronize and harmonize in a benevolent way, you have reached a malformed consciousness. This would be a malformed analog all. It would be a faulty structure in the psyche. You're not understanding correctly how reality works. Because if you understood how it worked completely and totally, and grokked it and have that phenomenological experience, you wouldn't be treating people the way you would be treating them. You'd realize that that has an internal butterfly effect and ultimately will disintegrate. Like Ross says, it causes that internal disintegration, and it absolutely will. You'll always have that internal disintegration when you're coming at it from this angle, because you're not having a unified psyche. Even collectively, you're having a psyche that's full of repression and dominance and control, which is not how it works. You need to be integrated. You need to have all parts working together in harmony and unity. And that's the difference. It's having all nodes and all pieces working together in harmony and unity, rather going, you group are enslaved to do this, and you must do this, and we will do this and command. No, it's everyone fitting together perfectly in harmony and synchronization. Okay, anyway. Don says, what does the Orion Group have? What's the objective with respect to the conquest of the Orion Group? What are they trying to do? Ra says, I am Ra. As we have said previously, their objective is to locate certain mind-body-spirit complexes which vibrate in resonance with their own vibrational complex, then to enslave the unelite, as you may call those who are not of the Orion vibration. So this is very, very interesting. So what's Orion trying to do? They are trying to locate people who resonate in the same, who vibrate in resonance with their own vibrational complex. They're trying to locate people who have the same mindset as them, so they can create an elite and then enslave the rest of the population. Don says, what do the Crusaders do? I believe Crusaders are a certain type of member of Orion. I am Ra. The Crusaders move in their chariots to conquer planetary mind-body-spirit complexes before they reach the stage of achieving social memory. So you have these certain types of members of the Orion Group, and what they want to do is conquer a planetary population before it achieves social memory. It starts working together in such harmony that they form an interconnected unity. And again, this is really interesting. So in the context of how we see operating the world right now, what we are trying to do is move the world towards forming that interconnected, what we would call a subnetwork mind. So that would, again, be moving from what Ra would call from fourth density even to fifth density. That gets a little more complicated because that starts to get at a very high level of synchronization. But essentially, yes, Crusaders are certain beings, entities that don't that want to basically conquer the consciousness of a planet, the people of that planet, before it reaches that stage. Then we have crusaders from Orion coming to this planet for mind control purposes. How do they do this? I'm going to mention something about that, but let me just read what Don says here. It says, as all, they follow the law of one, observing free will. Contact is made with those who call. Those then upon the planetary sphere act much as you do to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding of the law of one, which is service to self. These become the elite. Through these, the attempt begins to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. Okay, so this is what's really interesting here. What Ra is basically saying is that, you're not having... Orion's not like landing in spaceships and running around with laser guns. That's not what's happening. They're saying that contact is made with those who call. So those who are aligned with the same mindset. Those then, upon the planetary sphere, act as you do to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding. So then people who have understood the philosophy of Orion disseminate that philosophy of Orion. So basically, just like how Ra is saying, okay, your group, the group that Ra is speaking to, you're trying to spread a philosophy. You're trying to spread this idea. And what we do is the same thing. We're trying to spread the Neogenian, the new beginning, the idea that we can create a united planetary civilization based on creating a higher quality of life for every individual and the collective, a purpose-focused life for everyone so that everyone can benefit. But they're saying what happens is that Orion disseminates their philosophy to individuals, and then those individuals disseminate that philosophy to the world. And then the people who disseminate it, they become the elite. And through these, the attempt begins to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. So essentially, brainwashing, essentially, it's not Orion physically interacting with the planet. It's that there are people who have ideas that align with Orion's philosophy and then try to spread that philosophy to convert the world to that way of thinking, which ends up in enslavement of the planet, but ends up in enslavement of the planet by the people's free will because they have allowed it to happen. They haven't done anything to stop it. They haven't done anything to change it. It has been allowed to happen. So Don says, can you name any of the recipients of the Crusaders? That is, any names that may be known on the planet today. I am Ra. I am desirous of being in non-violation of the free will distortion. To name those involved in the future of your space-time is to infringe. Thus, we withhold this information. We request your contemplation of the fruits of the actions of those entities whom you may observe enjoying the distortion towards power. In this way, you may discern for yourself this information. We shall not interfere with the, shall we say, planetary game. It is not central to the harvest. So essentially what Ra is saying, because Don says, like, hey, can you name anyone? Who are they? And Ra says, that's kind of breaking the rules. We're not going to tell you by name who they are. But if you look to see at those who are in power and the types of things that they are saying, you can figure it out for yourself. But we're not going to interfere by actually telling you. But basically saying like, hey, It's kind of obvious. Look at the people who are in power. Look what they're saying. Look what they're doing. So Don says, how do the Crusaders pass on their concepts to the incarnate individuals on Earth? Ra says, I am Ra. There are two main ways, just as there are two main ways of, shall we say, polarizing towards service to others. There are those mind-body-spirit complexes upon your plane who do exercises and perform disciplines in order to seek contact with sources of information and power, leading to the opening of the gate to intelligent infinity. There are others whose vibratory complex is such that this gateway is opened in contact with total service to self, with its primal distortion of manipulations of others, is then afforded with little to or no difficulty, no training, and no control. From what I gather, they're saying that essentially people can make contact by doing, probably like altered states of consciousness, things like this, and then others who are just, it seems like, naturally good at it. They don't really need, so that's what it seems like to me. What Ra is saying, from my interpretation here, is that there are two ways. One, there are people who actually try to make contact with these beings, and then there are others who are just naturally doing what Orion wants them to do, so it doesn't matter. They're just on the same wavelength. What type of information is passed on from the Crusaders to these people? The Orion Group passes on information concerning the law of one with the orientation of service to self. The information can become technical, just as some in the Confederation, in attempts to aid this planet in service to others, have provided what you will call technical information. The technology provided by this group, in the forms of various means of control or manipulation of others to serve the self. Don says, I don't know if this is a short question or not, so we can save it till next time, but my only question is, why the Crusaders from Orion do this? What is their ultimate objective? This is probably too long to answer. I am Ra. This is not too long to answer. To serve the self is to serve all. The service of the self, when seen in this perspective, requires an ever-expanding use of the energies of others for manipulation to the benefit of the self with distortion towards power. So essentially what Ra is saying, it's not a long answer, it's a short answer, is that when you have chosen this path, then you are constantly ever expanding, looking for manipulation and conquest. So basically, when you are oriented in this negative orientation, which Ra says the Orion Group is, to serve the self is to serve all. This service of the self, which seen in this perspective, requires an ever-expanding use of the energies of basically, it's unending. If you have this desire for power and control and creating a system based on power and control, you are going to be constantly in this mode of conquest and domination because you need more and 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 more. So do you see the really big difference here? Because you can see reality as a unity in both ways, but in the way that the Orion Group is seeing it is towards conquering and manipulation and power and control, and using their understanding of reality for that purpose. And they do this by disseminating their particular philosophy and spreading it through the world and trying to get people on the same wavelength as them before people start to unify and harmonize and synchronize and form a unity that's in the direction of creating a harmonious, synchronistic world. So what basically, the purpose of Orion is to get in there before that happens and stop that from occurring and move the world towards a distortion of power and manipulation and control. So, and this is really key because, again, whether this is real or not doesn't matter. What is real is different levels of consciousness. And what is real is that people can use their understanding of reality in a negative way. Just because you raise your consciousness doesn't mean you're a good person. Now, and this is why I talk about a lot, that I see this a lot in occult groups and secret societies and esoteric circles, and even like in New Age circles now. And it's this idea of, the problem is that, and this is why I have a lot of problem with some of these groups and whatnot, is that people get into this stuff for power and control. Like when someone wants to, join an esoteric order or a magic order or a group, why is it? Because they want power, they want control. So they get into it for the wrong reasons. They get into it for power and control. Guess what happens? You start to raise, get up the ranks. And then so people who end up leading these orders or leading these occult circles or leading these organizations are themselves having this distortion towards power and manipulation and control. And so you see this structure and system used a lot in occult circles and esoteric orders. Now, I'm not saying that they're all bad by any means, but I'm saying I have seen it become bad a lot because you have people who are studying these things, and so they start to raise their consciousness, but they start to raise their consciousness without, first of all, coming from the place of wanting power and control. And they don't do, see, in our system, when you reach hyper awareness, this is a very high level of consciousness where you have a properly developed analog all and you have phenomenological experience. So with true hyper awareness comes with automatically moving towards unity in a productive way, because you realize, oh, to harm you would be to harm me, and to harm, we're all part of this together. Yeah, of course. Like, it just flows naturally when you reach a true understanding, but they haven't reached that level yet. They're kind of in between, where they have an understanding of what reality is kind of, but not really. And so they use that understanding for manipulation and control. And that's why these systems and places can be kind of dangerous, because a lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons. Just Google like a bunch of magic and occult stuff, and it's going to be like, oh yeah, learn this spell to attract money. Learn this spell to get someone to fall in love with you. Learn this spell to, or whatever. And it's all about that sort of thing. And it starts to, orient people in very negative ways towards power and manipulation and control. And they don't understand that when you really understand what reality is about, it's about creating a better world for me and you and everybody, all of us together. And so anyway, I just want to, that's why, I'm always hesitant with some occult stuff, but there's interesting things to learn in there, as long as we're always very cautious and examining things critically with logic and reason. So just because someone claims to be, knowledgeable or whatever, don't think that they're necessarily, going to use things for positive purposes. They can be trying to screw you over or manipulate you or control you, because they've learned how they have gained power, but they haven't learned how to use it in a healthy way. So with this information, there's a lot, by the way. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. We probably have read a sixth of the information of what's in here about the Orion Group and negative entities. If you want to know more about the Orion Group and negative entities, let me know in the comments, especially on the replay. If you want to know more about the Orion Group, negative entities, if you want to know about the harvest and all these things, let me know in the comments. Tell me. But as always, I just want to remind you that it's important to stay skeptical. We don't know if this information is real, could be all made up, or it could be a manifestation of Carla's collective unconscious. We don't know. But regardless, it doesn't really matter, because this information, what they're saying about people trying to move the world in a negative way, people using their understanding of reality to manipulate and enslave others, that there are entities that have nefarious goals. all that stuff is on point. So we can, whether it's, true or not, we can learn from it and use it to discuss these concepts and use it as talking points. But I'm always curious what you think. Tell me in the comments, do you think it's real? Do you think it's made up? Or do you think that it is a manifestation of Carla's unconscious mind, the channeler's unconscious mind? I'm interested to know. Tell me, what do you think in the comments? And we're going to do a poll if you're part of the live stream after this to see what you think. Hey, if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot. You get access to all our members only videos. And if you support on tier 2 or higher on YouTube, you also get access to all the members only videos. And there's a new one every single week. But as always, I never want you to feel pressured to support monetarily. You don't have to. Only do it if you feel good about it, if you're in a place where you can do it in a healthy way and afford it and all that. Don't feel pressured at all. There's plenty of free ways you can support, like liking and subscribing and sharing my videos. But that being said, your support does help a lot. And I want to shout out everyone who does, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Enki, Nuselina, Merlin, Paul Rogers III, and everyone else. Thank you very much.